Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Twilight Zone from the 1980s. This is Season 2, Episode 9. There's 3 stories in this one. They are called Joyride, Skelter, and Private Channel. So spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Cindy for making the pick. So this was 3 solid concepts, I would say, which maybe sounds like a little of a backhanded compliment because notice I didn't say 3 solid stories, and I think it's because at least 2 of them kind of have an interesting premise. They do a couple of interesting things with it, but ultimately either the story's a little too short or the ending doesn't necessarily feel like a big, it doesn't feel like it really pays off anything in a big way, where it just kind of like makes a sort of the point that it's been making the whole story without adding like an extra flavor at the end or anything like that. So it just feels a little bit like the punches are being pulled, and maybe it's just as simple as, especially for the first one might just be too short, because this episode's kind of split into like a 10-minute story, give or take, a 20-minute story, and then a 10-minute story, again, give or take. So the 10 minutes for the last one's okay, it kind of gets its point across fine, but the first one, Joyride, is, like, it's got such a specific idea, specific concept, that you really feel like they could do a lot more with it if they had more than 10 minutes. But it stars Robert Nepper, who you might know from Prison Break and other stuff. In fact, I want to say I recognize someone in all 3 of these stories. Some more than others, right? I knew this guy well enough. I know someone in the 3rd stories in Hellraiser, so I recognized him quite easily. The middle story has a guy who I recognized but couldn't quite place where I knew him from at first. He's been in a few things, but they ended up, the one that triggered my brain was actually Baby's Day Out, of all things, from watching that as a kid. But regardless, the premise of Joyride is that 2 couples, the 2 guys are brothers and their girlfriends, and Robert Nepper is kind of the older, more rebellious brother. He's the one who likes to do dangerous things, and he convinces his brother and the girls to basically steal a car, right? We find this nice vintage car, he wants to steal it, they hotwire it, and they go for a joyride. The Twilight Zone twist of this story is that once they're in the car, they start noticing stuff, right? The other 3 characters anyway, because Nepper's driving. They start to notice that the cars outside look like they're old, like from the 50s. They also start to notice that Robert Nepper's character starts to like seem to know things about the car that he shouldn't know, and his personality starts to shift a little bit. And eventually they get pulled over by a cop who, again, feels very 1950s, and he references that there was an armed robbery at a store earlier that night, and the store he brings up has been closed for years. Like, the brother's like, wait, that's been shut for years, what are we talking about? So clearly, like, there's kind of like a time element happening here. There's some kind of like weird time bubble, and that's interesting. It's like they've tried, I mean, at first, actually, at this point, you're probably just thinking they've went back in time, right? The car's taking them back to when the car was involved in a robbery, right? The surprising bit here is that Robert Nepper actually pulls out a gun that's in the car and shoots the cop and kills him and drives off, and the other 3 start freaking out. Like, what the hell did you just do? What are we doing here? And where it gets maybe more interesting from a conceptual level, not that the time travel element is lame on its own, it's actually a pretty solid idea. We're exploring something that this car was involved in. It's like a conduit to the past or whatever. But it's actually a little bit more specific than that. Basically, they've not actually traveled in the past. They only experience the past from inside the car. And what I mean by that is, as soon as one of the characters goes outside the car, they're actually in present day, and the car's sitting still parked where they stole it. It's not moved in present day. Everything that's happening inside the car that they can see, feel, and hear, and everything else is all just in the bubble of the car itself. And as soon as they leave the car, because one of the girls gets shot by the cop when they're driving away, and obviously they're panicking, and when she gets basically thrown out the car, not only is she immediately in present day and the car's not moving, she's also not got a bullet wound anymore. She's fine. So it's like, oh shit, like, there's actually a really cool concept there, especially once all 3 characters that aren't Nepper get out the car. There's like firemen who've arrived, there's police that have arrived, and they're trying to get him out, and like a firefighter like wedges a door open and goes in to like grab him and get him out because they think he's trapped in the car. And he doesn't even notice at first that when he's in the car, it's technically moving on the inside, and then he kind of notices that they're actually moving. He's like, what the hell? And basically, eventually, the story ends with them just pulling Robert Nepper out of the driver's seat into the present day, and he's kind of confused and thinks he killed someone. And when he shows the gun that he thought he killed someone with, the cop there is like, okay. I mean, obviously he's a little bit alarmed that this guy's waving around a gun, but when he looks at the gun, it's clearly, it's not usable. It's old. It's rusty and does not work anymore. And that's basically the story. And the point of it, effectively, is that the man who owned this car, who kind of possessed Robert Nepper's character, he committed this robbery and killed someone in the 50s, and he never confessed. And apparently he regretted that. So his, ghost or spirit that kind of embodied the car confessed it for him here. That was the point of this. Conceptually, this is all cool. I particularly really like the part of the idea that they're not actually moving, right? It's not like they're actually driving through the town and they're just seeing a different time period than what's actually on the outside. The fact that the car's actually stationary, and as soon as someone gets pulled out, they realize, oh, we've not actually been moving, and there's kind of like a weird... Because the idea of the momentum change is quite interesting to me, especially when the firefighter like breaks in to grab him and pull him out like he's saving his life, and then he looks around and goes, wait a minute, we're on a highway now. What's going on? Like, that's actually quite interesting to me. It's like a really weird mechanic of this bubble that's actually kind of existing in its own little world almost. But all you have to do to get out of it is leave the car. Like, I think this would have benefited from like twice the runtime, or even like a full episode, honestly. Like, I think there's so much you could do of them being trapped in kind of a haunted car, but like maybe like even if they realize they can get out and they'll be okay, maybe someone does get out, but then they realize they can just go back in easily because the car's not moving in the present day. They can literally just open the door and go in anytime they want. You could do a lot with that and trying to like help the driver who's possessed to try and like snap out of it, and you could do a lot of stuff where like maybe, I don't know, I mean, I guess because they're not moving in present day, there's not a lot of like obvious peril that he can put other people in because the car's not moving, but like it feels like there's like a rich well here of potential thrills to have and interesting mechanics of the time moving differently, or the physics being different in both times, because in one they're moving and the other they're not. So regardless, like, it's still a fun concept, but ultimately it feels like it's barely scratching the surface of what they could have done with the concept. So I have to be a little bit more lukewarm on it because of that, but the actual concept of how the time bubble works in the car and outside the car is actually pretty cool. So that's kind of what I was getting at when I was saying concept, great, execution feels like it needed some more. So, and that kind of carries forward into the second story, although I don't think the concept's as cool in the second story, to be fair. Like, it's and weirdly, what I think is the weakest story of the three is the one that gets the most time, which is always annoying. But the second story is Skelter, and it's basically about this guy who is a doomsday prepper, who he believes that the nuclear war is coming, the fallout's going to happen, and he's built a secret bunker in his basement. His family know about it, his wife, played by Joan Allen, and the kids know about it, but he's also like such a prepper and like such a kind of a toxic, masculine type guy that he's like teaching his 7-year-old son to shoot a gun, and he seems to only care about surviving with him and not his wife and daughter. He's like, oh no, I'll make a man out of him, and we'll, basically when he starts talking to his friend and he admits to his friend he's got this bunker to survive a nuclear fallout, he basically says he's hoping for it to happen. Like, he doesn't belong in this world with pop music and other things going on. He wants to feel like he's a survivor when everyone else can't cope. So he's super toxic, and it's all really just about how much he isolates himself, right? Early on in the story, there's a constant complaint that he never spends time with his family because he's always in that bunker, prepping and planning and doing stuff down there. He's obsessed with it. So the big sort of thing that happens here is that there's some news stories in the background of like tensions rising and whatnot. And then ultimately, there is seemingly a nuclear explosion of sorts, right? And him and his friend, when the wife and kids are away visiting some relatives, they end up just the main guy and his friend who works for him go into the bunker, and that's it. It's happened. He believes that it's all going down, and they're going to stay in there to wait out the radiation, and they've got food and supplies and so on and so on. and they get some really bad fake beards to show that time has passed. So I have to mention it. They look pretty rough. But the whole thing here is that eventually the friend like wants to leave. He doesn't want to be stuck down here. He doesn't want to just be a survivor. He wants to go and look for people. He wants to do stuff. And he's not fitting into the main character's idea of this fantasy that he's got. So there's a bit of a rift and he leaves. But then he comes back begging to get back in because he can't find anyone and there's no sun coming up. It's apocalyptic out there, but he won't let him in, right? And ultimately the main character ends the story like sort of arming himself like Commando, where he's got face paint on and he's got a bunch of guns and he's not opening the door. He's truly and utterly isolated himself from the outside world, and he's a victim of his own doing, effectively. Now you're probably saying, well, he's not entirely a victim of his own doing. The nuclear war did happen. Actually, no, it didn't exactly. So the twist at the end of the story is that the camera, after he like arms himself and he's looking like he's just this guy now in the post-apocalypse, the camera kind of moves, shows some debris, shows some stuff on the outside, but then reveals that the reason why the other guy couldn't see the sunlight ever when he was outside looking is because a dome has been built over this town, because only this town had an explosion. And it wasn't an attack, it was actually a military base doing testing or something that had an accidental detonation. And that's what happened. So people did die. It's not like there wasn't a tragedy here. But ironically, his wife and kids survived because they wanted away from him for the weekend and they got to survive while he's trapped in his bunker. And at the end of the episode, we see the wife and kids, and the kids are like, oh, is that where dad's buried? And she kind of smiles and says, yes, that's where daddy's buried. And she looks delighted that she's rid of him. So it's very much a story about, you know, him, like, basically making his reality happen in a way. Not that he caused the explosion, but he's so determined to live out this isolated lifestyle that he shuns away everyone in his life, his family, and then when he's trapped with his friend, he shuns his friend away. He pushes everyone away, and all he cares about is, even when he's on the phone, when he thinks the attack's happening, before the explosion goes off, he literally says to his wife, send my son in a cab, you and the daughter can stay there, but send my son. So he's an unlikable prick. And he is clearly like got one thing on his mind. He's obsessed with this idea of being a survivor, and that's kind of it. So yeah, like the concept's like fine. Don't get me wrong. I like stories of isolation. I think the character work is a little on the nose because he's kind of just turned up to 11 immediately. But you've only got 20 minutes, so you don't have time to really be too subtle about it. But you know, it is kind of there immediately who he is. It never really changes. And it's not like he grows to regret his decisions. It's not like at the end of the episode he breaks down because now he feels lonely and he's learned the error of his ways. He hasn't. If anything, he's just doubled and tripled down. He's going to be him forever. And you know, the little twist at the end is cool and all. But I in a weird way, I almost think that it would have been better if there wasn't an actual explosion, right? So, like, something convinced him that it happened and he trapped him and his friend inside or something like that. But the fact that there was an accident, I don't know, like I almost feel like either it should be his fault that he thinks he has to go in, or even it's his fault that something happens that looks like a nuclear bomb, or I don't know, like I don't even know what I'm saying, because why would he cause that, or how could he cause that? But I guess I'm just saying that because the explosion is completely random and accidental, it feels a little bit just convenient for the sake of the plot, weirdly, right? It doesn't really feel like there's a good reason for why this accidental explosion goes off that allows for the twist at the end. But maybe that's a minor nitpick in the grand scheme of things. But you know, at the end I was kind of thinking, I was like, okay, I get the gist of this, I get what it's saying, and it works, but I don't know if it really has that much of a cool hook at the end, right? I don't think, like, I think early on we get exactly who this character is, and we get that the other characters are going to be better off without him. Maybe we did need him wanting or like regretting his actions and thinking he's trapped in here, which maybe would be very similar actually to it would almost be like an asshole version of Time Enough at Last, where he finally has got what he wanted, right? And that was literally an apocalypse as well in that case. But you know, in this case, it's not so much that he, you know, can't read anymore. It's more that, oh, I've realized now when I can't have it how important it is to have other people around you and have people that care about you. Maybe that would have been a more satisfying conclusion than him just kind of not changing at all. Like maybe there's a moment of doubt when he won't let his friend in. He maybe looks like he feels a little bad about it, but that's kind of it. Like it needed some extra little character arc or something to really give it a bit of punch at the end. But the concept's fine. Like what they're playing with here is very solid. And once I realized we were talking about potential nuclear war and stuff, that's usually a fun topic for a Twilight Zone to tackle. They've done it a number of times between the two shows at this point. So, not bad by any means, but definitely doesn't like elevate to like, you know, great story status either. I'd probably say I like Joyride a bit more out of the two so far, just because conceptually it was more weird and interesting, but also not perfect because maybe it was too short for what it was doing. The final story of the three is called Private Channel and stars or features a character who is like obsessed with music. He's always listening to his headphones and he's got drumsticks in his hand and he's always drumming, and he's kind of a rude dipshit about it, right? He's rude. He's going on a plane, right? He's going for a flight somewhere, and he's rude kinda to the people at the airport. He's rude to the flight attendants although weirdly they tell him that like they don't allow radios on the plane, which was that actually a rule on planes at one point? I can't imagine people not all listening to stuff. Maybe it was something to do with like the way everything was broadcast back then. It was maybe a hazard of some kind. I don't know, but they seem to not like him having a little pocket radio. What's very strange though is that he holds up his radio and says, "This isn't a radio. This is a," and he describes it like the tech specs, and like he's so proud of this device that he's got, like it's top of the line hi-fi equipment or something. And I'm like, this is so weird to hear him, because it's not even like it's like a cassette player or a CD player. It's literally just a radio. To the point where when he goes to the bathroom later, he's complaining that wherever they're flying, the only stations they can get up here are like old country music or whatever. Although I do wonder like how much of a radio signal you would get in a plane, you know, given how like, you know, tall the actual radio towers are. I'm not sure how much coverage you're getting and, you know, the height that planes fly at, but regardless, they should have called this episode or this story radio signals at 30,000 feet. That's a stupid joke. Anyway, so the actual main premise of this though, so that's the introduction to the character wise here, and sitting down next to him is Andrew Robinson, who is an actor who was in Hellraiser, so I recognized him right away. And the gist of the story here is that the main character, during a bit of turbulence, drops his radio and it gets knocked and whatever. When he puts it back on, instead of hearing the radio, he starts hearing other people's thoughts, right? So he's not got telepathy himself. It's not like he's hearing it in his head. It's literally coming from his radio, from his headphones. Because there's a woman at the door for the bathroom asking to get in, but when he opens the door, it turns out that she never actually said anything out loud, but he was hearing things like, "Oh, hurry up, I think I'm going to be sick," and something, but it was all in her head. And then he kind of notices it again when he's walking down the aisle in the plane, because this girl's looking at him and she's thinking, "Oh, what a cute guy, I bet he's got nice buns," or something like that. And he's like, "Huh." So he's just sort of like, he was in shock, and he's like trying to process the fact that he's hearing people's thoughts. But the crux of the story is that he then hears someone have very bad thoughts. Someone who is planning on blowing up the plane. And they conceal the face. It's very obvious it's going to be the guy that was sitting next to him, though, because there's like no one else it could be who we'd recognize. Like it's obviously going to be him. So it's not even like a big deal when they reveal it. But yeah, he hears this is going to happen. And it was hard not to think of a certain episode of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, with the episode called Earshot, where Buffy has telekinesis telepathy for an episode, not telekinesis. That's moving stuff with your mind, not hearing stuff with your mind. Telepathy, and she hears someone planning on killing people at school, and that's very similar kind of idea. So this is a fun plot, right? It's obvious tension, and because the first half of this story is done nothing but set up that the main character is a slacker who only cares about music and would be useless in a crisis, watching him have to be the one who now has to warn the flight staff, hey, someone's planning something bad, is actually quite good. It's because you've basically put him in this corner where no one believes he'll ever be the hero, and now he has to try and be the hero. It actually was quite effective, I thought. And again, a short 12-minute episode story, whatever it was, they did enough to make it kind of a big deal that this loser is the one who's going to have to try and save people. And when he sits down next to his his seating partner again, he realizes it's him. And he actually starts like seeing into his head, and he hears basically the backstory of why this guy's doing this. And basically, this guy's wife and daughter were on a plane that crashed, and it was due to negligence from the airline. So that's why he's going to do this. He's going to do this to get revenge and expose them or whatever. And he just starts saying, "Hey, I know what you're going to do. Don't do it." And kind of like makes it obvious that he does really know. And the guy starts saying, "You don't know me. You don't know why." He's like, "I do know why you're doing it, but you can't do it." And he gets kind of emotional. And ultimately, yeah, he stands up, he opens his shirt, he's got everything strapped to his chest, and everyone's freaking out. And the way that the main character deals with the situation, and I think this is the most satisfying ending to any of these three stories, because this does feel like a pretty good ending, actually. Because the main character's whole thing is that he doesn't really listen to what anyone else is asking of him, right? He's kind of rude, he only thinks about himself. And then he starts hearing people's thoughts, which maybe makes him think twice about that. And he saves the day with quick thinking by simply putting his headphones on the potential bomber. He just puts his headphones on so that while this guy's standing there with his hand on the trigger and he's got the vest on, he can hear everyone in the plane be scared. He's hearing their thoughts and like hoping they're going to see their loved ones again, and weeping on the inside and thinking of their kids and their children and their parents and all that. And that does make him kind of like break down and say, "Sorry, what have I done?" And then, the flight staff kind of like take his hands and take the trigger off of him. I will say the flight staff like do this very calmly. I feel like in the real situation, they'd be like getting a lot more aggressive just to make sure he can't change his mind any split second later. But, I thought this was the best of the three stories because the concept's cool. It does enough to set up the main character's flaws, and then he's put in a position where he has to overcome those flaws to try and help save everyone, and then just extends that empathy to the character who needs to be convinced to have empathy. And it kind of works. And then during all the turmoil after this, the radio falls and people step on it, so he can't even keep listening to people's thoughts. It's almost like he just got this ability for 10 minutes to save everyone's lives on the plane. And it's a very neat, simple little story. Now, much like Joyride, I do think this could be a longer, like you could do a full 20-minute, 40-minute episode out of this premise, I think, and make it compelling, because you could do a lot more building up to who is it. Because if you had time to introduce like a cast of characters on the plane, like memorable faces, all over, you could even do a full movie with this premise of like, hey, like there's like 8 characters that have been introduced, and one of them is this person planning to do this, and the main character has to try and figure out who so he can stop them. That's a movie plot right there. But this is 12 minutes, and I think they did a really good job of telling all the parts they needed to tell to make it really satisfying in 12 minutes. So yeah, good job. I thought Private Channel was a pretty solid story. And I didn't think I was going to like it that much. The first couple of minutes of it was introducing the main character, I was like, okay, he's a bit of a dick. What are we doing here? But then that actually fed into the story. It was setting him up that way so that it was like, oh shit, he has to level up. He has to become a better person and try and help people. So it feels like a bigger deal that he's pulling it off. And that's nice. So the themes of empathy, this idea that if he does do this to the plane, that this potential terrorist is just going to do to other people what happened to him, and realizing that is what makes him stop. So yeah, very good. Probably my favorite of the three. Like I said, conceptually they were all good to really good or great even, but some of them are just a little bit hampered with either the runtime they had to actually flesh out the story, or just kind of maybe some of the plot beats along the way maybe undermined or muddied the waters a little bit. But I think the last one is the most satisfying and well-rounded of the three, even though I do think you could absolutely extend it to almost any runtime, as long as you use that runtime to build up more mystery and suspense and more character, deconstruction and advancement in arcs and stuff like that. But yeah, so as far as the episode overall of 80s Twilight Zone goes, this is a pretty decent one, because I think, you know, none of the episode stories were bad. They all had something interesting going on, even if they didn't, like, you know, hit any home runs, right? But the last one was pretty good, and definitely, you know, because some of these ones tend to just be like a mediocre one and a couple of stinkers, right? Like, that's happened a few times. So this is on a pretty reasonable end of the scale, all things considered. So definitely not mad that I watched this one, and it was easy viewing. So yeah. So I mean, it may not be the, you know, the praise that everyone hopes to hear, but it's, you know, it's not bad, right? I don't feel bad at all about it. So that's my thoughts on this episode of 80s Twilight Zone. Of course, you can let me know what you thought of this one if you've seen it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And you can support everything over at patreon.com and help keep everything coming. You know, like, the way I always like to phrase it is that if you sign up to Patreon for $5 a month, you're like, that's more money than I would get if you watched every single video every month, and like, you know, like, had the ads on every single one. Like, that $5 is still way more than that. So but regardless, yeah, check out Male Fuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live, and you know, thanks to everyone who already supports everything. But that is me. Thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.